Hello everyone, my name is Maggie Gray. I'm a civil engineering student at the University of New Brunswick, and I will be presenting mine and Trevor Hansen's research paper called Towards a Visitable Housing Policy in Fredericton. To begin, I'm going to talk about the goal and objectives of this project. The main goal that we wanted to achieve by conducting research was to explore the concept of a visitable housing policy in Fredericton, New Brunswick. To do so, we set 3 objectives. The first being to conduct a literature review. This included researching the existing policies and the limitations with those policies, as well as background information on Fredericton and visitable housing as a concept. Next was to create an inventory of accessible homes. This process began by reaching out to city officials, which it was then found that there was no data available, so 6 dissemination areas were used as sample size in order to create an inventory. Finally, a survey was created and distributed to builders in Fredericton to get a better understanding of their perceptions and drawbacks on visitable housing. Before I get too far into this presentation, it is important to first understand what visitable housing is. Visitable housing employs 3 main design features, which are 1, a zero-step entry, 2, 32-inch wide doorways and hallways, and 3, an accessible bathroom. The concept of visitable housing originated in the US and was created with the idea that inclusion of architectural access features in all new homes is a civil right. Visitable housing policies are found in places like Austin, Texas, and Pima County, Arizona. Going back to my first objective of conducting a literature review, some standout points from the review were that New Brunswick's disability rate in every single age group is higher than that of the national average. And this can be seen in Table 1 in the paper and the first table shown on your screen. The most common types of disabilities in New Brunswick are pain-related, flexibility, and mobility. These disabilities limit the body and can impact a person's ability to travel and may require accommodations and mobility aid in the built environment. To accommodate people's needs in the built environment, the National Building Code of Canada, otherwise known as the NBCC, has mandatory provisions for building accessibility, but not all structures are subjected to its provisions. In fact, only 15% of dwellings in New Brunswick are of the type that would be subjected to the NBCC building requirements. Seeing that the NBCC requirements did not cover all the structures, we wanted to get a better understanding of how many houses have accessible entrances. So, to do so, we looked to CHAS data to get a better understanding of accessible entrances found in New Brunswick. And what we found was that New Brunswick has the lowest rate nationally of individuals living in homes with zero-step entrances, and this was found to be 13% of all homes. To put that into perspective a little bit, British Columbia has the highest rate, and that was found to have a rate of 36% of all homes having a zero-step entrance. This raises larger issues for people wanting to age in place, people with physical disabilities, and people wanting to host or visit other homes who have these issues of mobility and flexibility and physical disabilities. Continuing on, during the literature review phase of the research, there were apparent limitations and concerns of the concept of visitable housing. First, a CMHC, or Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, study found that some of the main barriers for implementing a visitable housing policy included limited awareness, lack of demand in the housing market, builder and developer reluctance, and confusion surrounding policies and criteria for a visitable housing policy. Although the main limitation to the concept of visitable housing is that it only considers the minimum level of accessibility in order to accommodate wheelchair accessibility. The design features fail to consider sensory and cognitive disabilities, and finally, accessibility is not maintained throughout the whole house, so features such as the height of counters, weights of doors, height of sinks, mirrors, light switches, and the driveway grades are all features that are not considered when making a visitable housing policy. Moving on to the results section, one of the main results that was gathered in this project is a housing profile of the city of Fredericton. It was found that single detached houses are the largest single home type in Fredericton, and apartments with fewer than 5 stories are the second. This is shown in the first table, shown on the screen here, and also table 5 in my paper. It was also found that the majority of the housing stock in Fredericton is constructed from the year 2000 and earlier, with a large chunk being built from the 60s to the 80s and earlier, as shown in Table 6 and the second table shown on this slide. Moving on to the inventory results, pictured on the screen is a map showing the different dissemination areas within the city that were used to create a sample for the inventory of zero-step entrances within Fredericton. The green areas on the map represent the dissemination areas that were chosen for observation, and the 6 dissemination areas were chosen based on the average age of the housing inventory, the location within the city, and the average age of the population within the dissemination area. When observing, only garden homes and single-family homes were considered. Based on the sample observations, the percentage of single-family homes and garden homes with a zero-step entrance were very small. The percentages range from 1% to 3.7% of all observations, and it was also found that the dissemination area with the lowest average age and the highest proportion of newly built homes had the lowest proportion of zero-step entrances. Average ages in certain dissemination areas were also not always representative of the area because of senior home complexes. Moving on to the builder results. The survey was sent out to 9 builders in Fredericton, although only 4 responded. All 4 companies who responded were similarly sized and reported the exact same numbers of single-family houses built in the past 10 years. All 4 companies also reported building some visitable houses in the past 10 years as well. All companies reported the same drawbacks to building visitable houses, which were an increase in price and the lack of demand on the housing market. The companies also reported the frequency of incorporating visitable housing features in their newly built houses. This is shown in Table 9 in the paper and the only table shown on this slide. And the most common feature that was incorporated in newly built houses is 32-inch wide hallways and doorways. To start to wrap up, I would like to talk about some of the limitations of the work. First, the use of Google Street View and Google Earth were inconsistent, as the images that were provided by those softwares were from between the years 2013 to 2019. Meaning that the census data that was used to compare in the inventory was inconsistent with each other. They did not line up. Secondly, this research is solely exploratory work, meaning that this research that was conducted about visitable housing was to gain a better understanding of this issue, but it does not provide conclusive results. Finally, the sample sizes for the inventory and the builder survey are small, so it is important to take that into consideration as well. To recap on this presentation, New Brunswick has one of the highest rates of disability in Canada. It also has the lowest rate of people living with accessible entrances. Through creating an inventory, it was found that 1% to 3.7% of garden homes and single-family homes had accessible entrances within the dissemination area sample size. So what does this mean? To me, there are 2 problems to be discussed, a present problem and a future problem. Based on the findings from this research, and the points previously said in this presentation, people with disabilities are not able to fully participate in society because of the built constraints from the majority of residential housing in New Brunswick. The future problem addresses the concept of aging in place, and people are currently not planning for the future, and they are adapting housing by retrofitting old houses. VisitAble housing helps to better both present and future problems by creating more inclusive spaces in newly built residential homes and by providing long-term accessibility for residents. Finally, this research is just the beginning for VisitAble housing in Fredericton, and there are so many more opportunities for further policy solutions for VisitAble housing development. I hope to be a part of them, and I'm eager to see where it goes. Finally, before I finish, I would like to acknowledge MyTax, UNB, CHAS, and the participants of the study for funding and making this project possible. Thank you all for listening, and I'm eager to hear your questions in the question and answer period.